Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well and welcome back to part 4 of this training series. So we've been discussing about the basic configuration that we need to do before we start BGP configurations. I know you are wondering, when are we starting to do the BGP configurations? Because the goal of this series is to help you understand how to implement basic to advanced BGP features on Nokia routing devices. But before you do the BGP configurations, you need to do the basic configurations. You need to configure the interface IP addresses. You need to configure IGP, OSPF, ISIS in your autonomous system numbers. And once you've achieved the connectivity between different nodes, you can now go ahead and start implementing BGP. So this session, we will be focusing on how to implement IBGP, the internal BGP peering session in AS65000 and AS65002. We know that in BGP, we can establish two types of peering session. We can have internal BGP, which is within the autonomous system, or we can do the external BGP, which is peering between nodes in two different autonomous system numbers. So in this session, we are just focusing on the IBGP peering session. And that's why we need to configure IBGP session between R1 and R3. We'll also establish a BGP peering session between R2 and R3 in 65,000. And we go ahead and also establish IBGP peering session between R4 and R5 in AS65002. For this IBGP peering session, we'll be using the loopback IP addresses. And that's why we had to do some configuration. We need to do IBGP configuration, OSPF in A65000 and ISIS in A65002. So this is what we'll be doing in this session to help you understand how do you configure IBGP on Nokia devices. How do you verify the IBGP status on Nokia routing devices using the verification commands that we'll be using in this session. So I hope you stay around. I hope after this session, you will be able to configure IBGP sessions on Nokia routing devices. And later, we will be exploring other advanced features of BGP. So again, just a kind request, if you are watching this session or if you've watched our training sessions on our channel and you are yet to subscribe to our channel, kindly support this platform by subscribing to it. Also remember to like, comment, and share this video with your connections. So let's start with the configurations. So I've mentioned that before you do the BGP configurations, you need to do some preparations. And that's why when you go to these routers, you will realize that we've done the preparations that are needed. We have configured the interface, show router interface. You see that we have these interfaces. We've configured OSPF, show router, OSPF 10 neighbor. You will see that we have OSPF adjacent this from R1 to R3, R2 to R3. Let me go to R3. It's better to demonstrate from here. Show router interface. You see that we have these interfaces, show router OSPF 10 adjacency. We have these neighbor, we have these adjacencies established. We can be able to ping 1.1.1.1. This is on R1. We should also be able to ping .2, which is on R2. On R5 and R6, actually it should be R4 and R5. We've also configured the interfaces. If I run show router interface, you will see that we have these interfaces. If I run show router ISIS 10 adjacency, you will see that we have an adjacency established. We will be using the system IP addresses to establish the BGP. So we should be able to ping the IP address configured on that interface. So you can see that from R5, we are able to ping 1.1.1.4. So we have everything ready. Now we need to start doing the BGP configurations. On R1, we only need to establish a BGP peering session to R3. So the first thing that you need to do, you need to configure the router ID. Now you can also configure it globally or you can configure it within the BGP configurations. In this setup, we are configuring it global. And then you also need to configure the autonomous system number that is used on this device. So you can see that we use the command configure router autonomous system. Let me make this one big enough. Configure router autonomous system number, it's 65,000. We configure router BGP, and then these are the BGP configurations. It's always recommended that you should be configuring groups. So the good thing with groups is that you can avoid using repetitive commands. Sometimes maybe you need to apply same commands on one peer. So you can group these peers into a group, and then you should be able to just configure one command, and this one command will be able to apply on all the peers within that group. So it's always a best practice to have BGP peering groups. Family, we are just configuring normal family IPv4. You could be having VPN v4, you could be having label unicast. You can decide which BGP peering session you want to establish, and then you can go ahead and configure the local AS. So the local AS, this is the local AS that is configured on this device, 65,000. You also need to specify the peer AS. So for IBGP, we have the same local AS and the peer AS, 65,000. And then you can also specify the local address. We are using the loopback IP or the system IP as the IP address that should be used to establish the session. So we are configuring the local address to be 1.1.1.1, and then we can now go ahead and configure the neighbors. So you need to use the neighbor command, you specify the neighbor IP, and then it's also a good practice to give the description. So it's very clear to identify this IP or this neighbor is for this device. So we are using the host name as the description. And then you also need to enable BGP. So you use the no shutdown command. If you don't run this command, BGP will not be running on this device. So on R2, we do the same. We need to configure the router ID. We configure the autonomous system number. We configure now the BGP parameters. We create a group IBGP, almost same. Just that we are now specifying the local address as a different address, which is the system IP of this node. And then we are pairing with 1.1.1.3. And you will see why we need to pair with R1, R2 with R3, but we are not establishing a peering session between R1 and R3. Remember, BGP has the concept of split horizon, so we'll be demonstrating that to you. On R3, we need to also configure the router ID, configure the local system number. We need to create a group IBGP. This group IBGP will be having two peers. We have neighbor R1, and then we have neighbor R2. So there is a lot that you can configure. There are many other parameters that you can configure, authentication, many other parameters, which we will be demonstrating how to configure in the upcoming sessions. Again, you need to remember that you need to enable that process. On R4, we do the same. Remember, on R4, we are just establishing a peering session from R4 and R5. So they are having an IBGP peering session. So you need to do the configuration on R4 and R5 for the IBGP peering session. One thing that you need to remember is you need to pay attention on the AS numbers. You need to provide the correct AS number. You need to provide the correct IP. For example, if you are configuring the local address and you give a wrong address, the session will not establish. If you are configuring a neighbor and you give the wrong neighbor address, the peering session will not come up. So you need to pay attention to these parameters. They should be the correct parameters, and then you should be able to configure it and confirm that the BGP sessions are up. So let's start by configuring R1. So on R1, I need to run these commands. So this is R1. I'll run these commands. Exit. If you do info, you should be able to see the BGP configurations on R1. On R2, I also need to run the commands. So on R2, we are establishing an IBGP session to R3. exit info, you see that we are having these parameters configured. You configure the local and PRS, you specified the family, you've also given the neighbor command and given it a description. On R3, we need to configure two peering sessions towards R1 and R2. Remember, this is just for IBGP sessions. In the next session, we will show you how to configure IBGP peering sessions. So on R3, we need to configure these commands and you can run info. So you see that we are having two neighbors, R1 and R2. Finally, we need to configure an IBGP session between R4 and R5. So I'll copy these commands, log into R4, and then apply the commands. We can verify the parameters configured using the info. The group name should also be descriptive. Don't just give it a random name. It should be able to identify this group or the members of this group. So this one easily tells you that these are for IBGP. You can have multiple groups configured on this device. Finally, we need to do the configurations on R5 and then we can verify the BGP status, the BGP peering status on the different nodes. So on R5, exit, I do info, you see that we are having an IBGP group created. We have the local and the PRS configured. Again, these are parameters that you really need to pay attention to. When you are preparing the script, just cross-check and ensure that all these parameters are okay to avoid spending a lot of time when troubleshooting these issues. It's not easy to troubleshoot, especially for these small issues. You could be checking so many other things, but maybe you've just missed the IP address or you've misconfigured the autonomous system numbers for the different nodes. So you need to pay attention to this. So once we've done these configurations, we need to verify the BGP status, the BGP peering status for the different nodes. Let's start by R3. If I show router, BGP summary, this is the first command. You can see these statistics, but our focus is on the sessions. You see that we have two sessions, and this is why the description is very important. If you did not put the description, you may not be able to tell that this is R1, this is R2, unless you are using specific addressing format that is able to identify the nodes. So this is session between R1 and R3. You can see that this is the AS, the packet received, packet sent. We have the uptime, so 2 minutes. We have the routes, how many routes have been received, how many routes have been sent. We have the family, so the address family is just the normal IPv4. Later, we can show you how to configure the VPN v4 peering session. This is R2. R2, we also have sessions. You can also do show router BGP neighbor. And then you should be able to give the IP address of the neighbor. So for example, if I were to run 1.1.1, use a question mark, there is a lot of information that you can get. You see that the description is R1, group is IBGP, the peer is 1.1.1, the peer address, the local address, the peer type is internal. This is why we are calling it IBGP. The peer port 179, BGP uses port 179. The local port will be a random port. Dynamic peer, this is not a dynamic peer. We can also check other parameters, local family, remote family, IPv4, IPv4. So there is a lot of information that you can check, especially when you are troubleshooting issues. There is a lot of parameter that you can check to ensure that they are aligned or they are correct when you have issues. Maybe the adjacent is not coming up, or maybe you are not receiving some route, the parameters are not correct, the attributes have been changed, so you can do some further troubleshooting using these commands. So we can do for SAM, if we do .2, of course, we expect almost similar output. We can check on R1. Show router BGP summary gives us the peering session. We can do BGP neighbor. And then we do 1.1.1.3. You will see the parameters. Let's verify the session between R4 and R5. So show BGP summary, show router. Always remember to use the router. Show router BGP summary. You should be able to see this peering session. You can do detail on R5. We can do the same. Show router BGP summary. We'll be able to see this. On R3, you can also show router BGP group. Should be IBGP summary. Let me see the option that we have. You can see that we have two sessions, list of static peers. We have these peers within this group. So you are able to tell that these are the members. These are the peers that we've established peering session with, and there are other parameters of that group. You see that the group is IBGP. We have the local AS. We have the local address. We have peer AS. Client reflects, enable, and many other parameters on these nodes. So this is how it is very easy to configure IBGP peering session on Nokia routing devices. Again, if you don't understand any of these commands or any of these parameters, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section and we'll help you to explain what they mean and what they do so that you can master the function of each and every command that we are using in these lab setups. I hope this is okay. I hope you've enjoyed this session. If you have, remember to like this session. Remember to comment. Also remember to like and share with your connections. And also, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, support this platform by subscribing. And we hope to see you in the next session where we'll be discussing about EBGP peering session. We have so many EBGP sessions. We need to establish EBGP session between R3 and R4, R3, R6, R6 and R7. And once we've done these configurations, we can now go ahead and play around with BGP attributes. So I hope you are good. I hope you have enjoyed this session again, and I hope to see you in the next session. Thank you so much for watching.